Hello, and welcome to the Guns on Pegs podcast with me, Chris Horn.
And me, Digby Taylor. It's great to be on. Stepping back in as a co-host with Chris. George, as you can tell, is not here. He's getting married for the second time to the same wife, which is quite nice. Just a celebration out in
Slovakia. So he's having a lovely time. That was very weird. We've done 80 of these episodes. This is the 80th episode, and I've never read out that first line. Never welcome to the podcast.
Is this the first one that George has been on holiday for?
It must be, yeah. So very odd. How's things your end, Diggers?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad, thanks. I've been spent the last couple of weeks on the farm in Cornwall getting our pens ready for our very, very small shoot. So struggling about with that sort of thing, which has been good fun and nice to be out and about in the sunshine and a bit of dry weather. So that's been fun. You've been very much in the hot and dry weather, haven't you?
Oh God, a much needed break from this horrendous weather we've had over here. I had a week in Corfu, which was absolutely lovely. Reminder of how nice it is to get away with the family. But back to work with a bang, all good, and had a fantastic day today so far. And all will become clear on that. It's all to do with Scrivehound, but all will become clear on that in a few months, maybe.
Yeah, good. I'm looking forward to hearing about
it. So all good. But anyway, I must introduce our guest today. Very excited by this one. This is going to be an interesting chat, especially as obviously Digby's side of the business, well, he's managing director of Guns on Pegs, but for the past however many years we've been working together, Diggers, you've been focusing almost entirely on the shoot side. So our guest today is the owner of the wonderful Braxted Park estate in Essex. It's a beautiful estate with I'm going to ask him how long this wall is around it in a minute, but it's just outside Whittam, and the family have been there since 1946, and the owner has done a huge amount to it. He has a well-known partridge shoot in the area, and it's much talked about by, certainly when I was growing up, all the farmers in the area talked about Braxted and held it in high regard. So looking forward to hearing about that. But also, and really interesting in regard to some of today's conversation, he was one of the founding trustees of the Country Food Trust, which feeds people in need using game. And given that I was also a trustee, I can say that he was absolutely instrumental in the growth of this charity and did a huge amount of work, which we will touch upon in a bit. So please put down the washing, stop putting the pegs on the clothesline, and put your hands together for Duncan Clark.
Well, hello there. Hello. Good to be here, Chris.
It's really good to have you with us. Yeah. So tell us, just for those that aren't familiar with Braxted, I mentioned just outside Whittam. Just give us a little picture on the estate.
A really beautiful house built in 1750 by Sir Robert Taylor. It was his first country commission. He had built quite a few houses in London, and the original owner was Peter Duquesne. There were three of them. One after the other. And the first one, very important fella, he sat on the board of the Bank of England, is also East India Company, one of them, key man in running the country, and he built himself this seat. And the house has these incredible windows, octagonal windows. They're the signatures of Robert Taylor. His son, Peter Duquesne II, came along, put the back of the house on, built the lakes, and did much of the parkland design. And then his son, who started around 1825, the order went out from London. It was after the Napoleonic Wars. All of the soldiers were out of work. There was a terrible recession on at the time, and the order went out, come up with a silly project to soak up the labour, and he did so by building this 4.5 mile red brick wall.
And that was genuinely a silly project to soak up. I can't believe that.
Well, they were all drinking like fish and rioting and making terrible trouble. So a lot of them were employed to build this wall, which is very much a case, everyone thinks I'm richer than God because I own about 10 million bricks. But in fact, you can't touch them. You certainly can't sell them because it's listed. but what you do own is the obligation to keep it up.
Goodness me.
I was going to say, surely every time some drunk driver sticks a car into it, you're in for quite a bit, aren't you?
Well, no, that's good news because I can claim on his insurance if he's got it. If he's drunk.
Claim for a mile of rebuilding the wall when they've hit one little dent in it or something like that.
Yeah, no, the worst thing is when it just collapses of its own accord, which it does regularly.
Oh, God.
It's the bane of my life, but a labour of love. But anyway, we keep it going. But it's at least £15,000 to £20,000 a year in upkeep, just keeping it going.
Well, we'll get on to some of the rest of the estate and the shoot, certainly, in due course. But, Duncan, and for those that listening to this the first time, the first original bit that got us going on this podcast and the first segment that we have and the bit that I think really ultimately we did it for is this "What's That You're Drinking" part of our podcast. So Duncan, as our guest, we'll ask you first, what's that you're drinking?
That is I don't know if you're doing this on film, but I'm holding it up to the camera. It's a good old gin and tonic is what it is.
And what gin have you gone for in that one?
The standard Gordon's.
So does that mean you drink standard slow gin as well? Gordon's slow gin?
Can do. Although, what's that one from Shropshire? That lovely lady makes. Anyway, we do that as well. And I'm a Fever Tree man myself, so I have Fever Tree tonic and Gordon's gin and a slice of lime here.
Oh, very nice.
It's nice. To be honest, I sometimes hate to admit it, but I do quite like a Gordon's gin. And stick some Fever Tree and you can't go too far wrong, can you?
I've actually got a gin and tonic as well, although I'm not a fan of fruit in a gin and tonic. So I don't put any lime, cucumber, lemon, orange, grapefruit, nothing, just pure gin and tonic. But the gin is from a shoot up in Yorkshire called Mount Garrett Shoot. On each day Frank Body hosts, he will put together a sweepstake for where every gun puts in a tenner, and the proceeds go to the Country Food Trust, actually. Most years, or sometimes the GWCT, or back in the day, the BGA. And my wife is very, very good at guessing the bag. So she won this. I've not yet won a sweep, but she seems to win every sweep she enters. And she won this lovely bottle of rhubarb gin. So no fruit in the gin and tonic, but some rhubarb in the gin anyway.
You don't need it if you've got the rhubarb in the gin. It sounds quite sweet, is it?
No, it's quite dry actually. It's you can't really taste it. It's not strong rhubarb or anything like that. It's it's not got too much sugar in it. It's more of just a hint of it. It's quite nice.
So your wife wins a bottle of gin and you drink it.
Yeah, that's the right way. Yeah.
Does she know about this?
No, she doesn't. She'll find out about it in an hour's time. But I might just put it back in the cupboard and hide it at the back.
Classic alcoholic thing to do.
What about you, Chris? What are you drinking?
So it was my birthday last week, and I got. I've actually had a number of different beers arrive in different boxes, which is really nice when it comes to choosing podcast drinks. I have a Cold Bath Brewing Company from Harrogate, handcrafted pale ale. I've not heard of them before, and I've not also had a sip, which I should have done.
Harrogate's up where this gin's from, isn't it?
It is
up near Mount Garrett.
Yeah, that's nice. Nice enough.
I need to put in actually a plug. Now we're plugging brands. Tiptree Jam have hooked up with Hayman's Gin, and Hayman's is made in Whittam. Tiptree Jam, obviously, in Tiptree. If you draw a line between those two factories, you come through Braxted Park estate. As a result, being good Essex man, this is what we serve at Elevenses. With a bit of Prosecco. It's absolutely first class. So you get strawberry, raspberry, there is a slow version, there's a damson, and there's even a quince. And they are quite delicious and very, very good house presents when you're lucky enough to be invited shooting.
Mm.
What's it called again, sorry?
Tiptree Jam?
It's got the classic Wilkin and Son label, but
it's got the Tiptree label.
Yeah. And when you come here, Christopher, you will be drinking it at 11 o'clock after the second drive.
Oh goodness, what a problem to have. Sounds lovely. That Tiptree Wilkin and Sons label is iconic, isn't it?
Incredible. We're very lucky here. We've got Malden Salt very close and Tiptree Dine. These are two iconic, enormous global brands recognized around the world. And it wouldn't do for me not to mention them.
Yeah, no, it looks good. I've just Googled the bottle. Very good. Well, now we've all got a drink and we're settled in, and I've had the first sip of this pretty average pale ale, actually. We shall move on to our segment where we reach deep into the mailbag. And I should actually put a plug out for George, who's probably in a pub in Slovakia at the moment. George chooses our correspondence and he also names them. It's become something that George really enjoys doing. But because George isn't here, we can talk about George's naming without him. So I should look forward to that. But Digby, why don't you
I was
kick
hoping
off?
to get away with being the one taking the credit for the naming of this one. But anyway, this episode's Whose Bird Is It Anyway comes from someone who I, or George, shall call Gaspode. Team, I'd like to talk about dogs. I joined a local and friendly syndicate shoot last year for my first season of shooting, after a few years of beating, and was a bit dismayed at how dismissive they were of my dog in its first season. I had started beating at another shoot a few years ago as a way to understand shooting, its idiosyncrasies, and to meet those with a similar enjoyment of the countryside. I got a dog around the same time, which was my first dog, and spent significant time, money, and effort training it to be a peg dog. I wanted to get my dog working on a syndicate shoot. COVID, jobs, and life got in the way of getting it picking up earlier. I took the dog one day along and explained it was the first time in the field, how I was wanting to bring it on, and like I'm sure anyone who has trained a dog will know, there will be good days and bad days, but training takes time. Some members, mostly those who had trained dogs, understood and were sympathetic. Some expected the dog only to be allowed to the shoot as the fully trained article, and by that I mean picking up all the quarry at all distances, including swims. Accepting that a badly behaved dog should probably go back to the beater's wagon or the gun's boot, my question is this: how does one train a dog for a shoot day, if not a gamekeeper? And how acceptable is it to take a long one in training? Does it have to be impeccable? Or should people be a little more understanding that shoot day training can only happen on a shoot day, and most people only have access to a few of those a year? A lot of the posher peg dogs I know of were not trained by their owners, so seems more of a credit card flex than a credit for capable training flex. If the community is happy to welcome in beginner shots, I think it should welcome in beginner dogs with the same encouragement and enthusiasm, especially as training a dog takes a lot of time and patience, and without the dogs picking up on the day could not work.
Duncan, as our guest, what do you reckon?
I have very strong views on this.
Good.
A good day shooting is a wonderful, relaxed family and friends affair for all types, from all backgrounds. And the same would therefore necessarily apply to dogs. And it's great fun, I always think, to see a totally out of control dog.
Fenton?
Yeah, very much so. It's boring if it runs into the next door drive before you've done it, but it happens and you just get to get on with it. The overtrained dog is, I think, says more about its owner, really. It's over professionalizing the whole thing. It's meant to be fun. The dogs are having huge fun. And this goes especially for picker-uppers, when there's nothing I hate more than to see one of these field trial types with 4 dogs and only one working and the other 3 sitting obediently to order. What I like to see is sort of 4 fat Labradors working the coverts, metronomic tails, hoovering up wounded birds.
Now, would you want to have some degree of recall there? I mean, if before you bring your dog out on its first day, or are you just totally relaxed?
I think you ask, and if it's really out of control, then you keep it on under some kind of control. But good luck. And as far away back from the next door drive as is possible. But I had a young dog, took it to Yorkshire, new strain. I had 6 mother daughters, and then the last one didn't breed. So I went and found a new breed, totally lost control, in Yorkshire when she was on her first season, and she got up after a hare. And the keeper was terribly funny. He said, "She's gaining on it. She's gaining on it. Oh dear. Oh dear, she's gone into the next drive." And it is pretty mortifying, but there we are.
I was about to say that's really rare, but you've had it happen to you. I'm with you on this, Duncan. I think that, I mean, that for me, I've not really seen that happen that much. And a bad dog is usually just one that's just kind of won't do what it should do, but it's still here or hereabouts and trying to find the birds, but just doing a pretty crap job of it. That's usually what you see when it comes to bad dogs, isn't it? It's not usually a problem. So I feel really sorry for this guy. I think that's really unusual in my experience. I think what he's experienced would be really unusual. And my suggestion would be go and find another syndicate, because he said, I joined a local and friendly syndicate shoot. It doesn't sound too friendly to me.
It slightly depends the breed as well. I mean, if it's a Heinz 57, then he may have trouble. Most gun dogs, spaniels, labradors, etc., are instinctively wanting to do what we want them to do. So it can be a problem when you get sort of a lot of crossbreeds and mongrels.
Yeah. So Diggers, on your little shoot at home, if someone brings a badly behaved dog and it runs into the next cover, which you shoot once a year and buggers it up.
I won't say what the name of the dog is, but anybody who knows me knows and has shot with us knows exactly what the name of the dog is. It's my favorite dog in the world, built like a rhinoceros, old English Springer Spaniel. And he will run from the top of the first drive, bearing in mind our valleys are sort of 80 to 100 meters deep. Will run from the top of the first drive right at the back, and you'll hear his owner shouting, "Get back, get back, get back." The dog will run to the bottom of the valley, across the river, pick up a bird, and then bring the bird back to the guy who's lost control of his dog on the first drive. So we absolutely love it. We roll around laughing. You can hear him shouting the whole way along, and it genuinely does make the day. If we were selling day shooting, then I wonder if my patience would be ever so slightly more tested. But and that's Duncan, where I think you say about going into the next drive, but I honestly makes the day every day. Absolutely love it.
Yeah.
So is that relaxed. Someone who's picking up?
No, someone beating. So it's a beating dog.
Okay, a beating dog. Fine.
Yeah, gone a good 200, 300 yards away.
Because that's different. If you're a gun, and certainly a paying gun, I think you've got a bit more flexibility. If you're a beater and you turn up and your job is to try and lay on a good day and your dog buggers it up.
Yeah, that's where, I mean, the guy who owns the dog is a great friend of ours. So you know, and we know exactly what we're expecting. And actually, this dog is such a rhinoceros that he can get into the cover that most other dogs can't. So we're incredibly grateful for them both turning up, but has brought about some funny moments.
Duncan, what are you doing in the scenario where a beater's dog runs into the next drive?
I delegate that problem to the gamekeeper.
Fine. Yeah. Okay.
Justice is swift and brutal, I suspect.
Yeah, I think so. I think the general advice then is consensus is we feel a little sorry for this chap, and it's a pretty rare scenario to come across.
Yeah, I think he's outlined his letter perfectly, and he's hit the nail on the head of the intention of when we get dogs. And it's just, I mean, I've just had first season with our little lab, and it genuinely changed shooting for me. Going through that process of the first time having my own dog and going to these days up in Yorkshire, and sleeping on the other bed in the hotel in a twin room, that type of thing. I just absolutely changed it for me, and. You just chat to this little person in the back of the car who just sits there and doesn't speak back. And I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that chats to my dog, but I'm sure not. Yeah, it's brilliant. And I think that his vibe here is bang on. And I think he's been a bit unfortunate. So thank you very much. Oh, Diggers, George called him Gaspode.
Yeah, I don't know the rest of it. His notes are Gaspode is a talking dog from Terry Pratchett's Disc World. Not much of that makes a lot of sense to me, but to someone slightly more cultured, I'm sure that's a very witty reference.
He loves a bit of Terry Pratchett, so I can see what he's done there.
Well done, George.
It's not the first time Terry Pratchett's had a mention on this pod. Good. So, yeah, thank you to Gaspode, who emailed pod@gunsonpegs.com. we have an unpopular opinion. So our job is to now decide whether this opinion is unpopular or not. And it comes from someone that George has called Brummel or Brummel. Wonder what he's going for there. Gentlemen, I have an unpopular, or rather what I hope will be a popular opinion, but I expect, sadly not. The subject of my opinion is shoot day attire, and more specifically, ties. Now, my view on the subject is that when you're shooting game, you should wear a tie. This, for me, shows a respect for the game you're shooting and upholds tradition and standards. It was on a recent Beaters Day I arrived, as I do when picking up, in my +4s shirt and tie, and I usually wear waterproofs over the top thanks to the great Yorkshire weather. Imagine my surprise when the majority of other shooting people on the day were wearing t-shirts, hoodies, and I even say one in a tracksuit. This is a fairly large-scale estate employing 2 full-time keepers and not a small farmer's knockaround. I was just interested to know the general opinion, so I suppose my real question is, ties on shoot days, a sign of respect and tradition, or an old ideal which we have moved away from? Many thanks, chaps. Love the podcast. Keep up the good work. I'm sure this has come up before. We've done 80 episodes, but it feels like I haven't done it in a long time. And I'm really glad this one's come out for our guest today, because I reckon I know where he's going on this one. But I could be wrong.
I feel terribly guilty because he is right. We should, but I don't. Particularly at home. And even when I'm lucky enough to be asked away, I probably have one in the case. And it's pretty clear if you're the only one, and then I'll put it on. But if 4 of the guns aren't, I won't. And it slightly goes back to I like the relaxed feel of it all. However, I completely get where the questioner is coming from. And I think it's a bit much to say it shows respect for the quarry. I respect the quarry, full stop, whether or not I wear a tie. Respect for tradition, he's got a point. So, yeah, guilty as charged. If someone said, no, we should go back to it, I would happily. But no one has, so I don't. And I don't insist on it at home. And by the way, I stopped wearing a tie when I saw a very senior member of the aristocracy doing the same.
Digby, what are your thoughts?
I don't like wearing a tie either. I wear it reluctantly, and I do wear a tie to fit in. But at home, we don't wear ties, and when I'm shooting with family elsewhere, we don't. I always remember not wearing a tie unless everybody else was. But the thing that I noticed was Beaters Day, which was an interesting comment. The particular scenario he's talking about is the Beaters Day. And I think we've had or you and George have had a question about sort of attire on Beaters Days before, haven't you?
I can't remember.
People who don't own +4s and smart shirts and that sort of thing. And I would sort of, I don't know. I want to know your opinion on attire in a minute, Chris. I think I know what it is. But I think on Beaters Day, I'd be inclined to be a little bit more relaxed, probably, in general.
Oh, by the way, I do draw the line at trackies. I do wear +4s, garters, and all that gear. It's just the tie we're talking about. It's just.
What about Duncan? What about these trousers, tweed trousers? I see around quite a bit these days.
Again, take your lead from senior aristos who are probably the leaders there. I think the dangerous one is when you're in the complete matching tweed and then you get called a gamekeeper because you're overly dressed. I think scruff order, but everything tweedy and +4y, if you see what I mean, but nothing matching.
I mean, I totally get this guy. Imagine my surprise when the majority of other people on the shoot day were wearing t-shirts, hoodies, and dare I even say one in a tracksuit. I mean, wow. That's definitely a drawn line. And I think, very popular opinion. There's no one that thinks that's acceptable that I've ever met. And if you do think it's acceptable, email pod@gunsonpegs.com. We'll tear you to pieces.
No, but I don't want it to give off the impression that you have to be shooting in +4s either. If you are beating on a shoot and it's your first day shooting, wear a pair of smart trousers, chinos, moleskin, something like that. You don't have to go all out and spend £100 on a pair of.
You're right to say that, because certainly when it's your first day, and especially people from abroad, like they haven't got the gear, and it is a fortune to go and buy all that stuff if it's a random invite. So yeah, just try and look smart. I think the point you said, Duncan, it's respect for tradition a little bit here, and there's a lot of tradition in shooting, a lot, and it doesn't stop just at the clothing. And so I think that not drifting too far is important. And I have noticed the tie being dropped by many people. It's interesting you talk about the sort of aristocracy type people of this world. I think on the grouse moor, that's probably what kicked that off, because it wasn't long ago when ties were just everywhere. And now you see a lot of open necks or cravats or something, or like, that sort of thing on a grouse moor. And that's drifted then into partridge shooting, then just into pheasant shooting. So a lot less ties.
Well, the reason I don't wear a tie at home is because I'm interchangeably beating and standing and, running up and down a hill and sort of trying to make things work to the best they possibly, as well as they can. And then you end up sweating and getting ridiculously hot and all those sorts of things. So it's just a practical side of things. But you're very much, you're a tie all scenarios, aren't you, Chris?
When I got introduced to shooting at a young age, I ended up at this place in Cambridgeshire, and I've mentioned this before, but the guy who owned the estate sent you home if you weren't wearing a tie or cleanly shaved, so I just only knew one way from a young age. And anyway, I once shot without a tie, and it was about 6 a.m. It was some wildfowling before a sort of rough day, and I would always take the tie, but it was 6 a.m. I was pretty hungover, and we got straight out of bed. It was absolutely freezing, straight into the stuff. And I remember shooting this duck, and the feeling I had not wearing a tie just made me feel so scruffy. I felt so weird about it. I've never pulled the trigger at a game bird not in a tie, and I just felt really odd. I can't explain it. It's just everything had to be how it usually is, and I've never done it again.
Well, we don't want you to go against your conscience. So if you ever come and shoot with me, then please do wear a tie.
Oh, mate, I'll wear a tie. Even when no one else is wearing a tie, I'll still wear it. I don't know why. I like it. But I think I'll probably be the last to change. We've got no explanation for why George calls this guy.
Beau Brummel was arbiter of British men's fashion in the Regency period.
Yeah, so why is he called him Brummel? That's why I said Brummel, because I knew I would have said Beau. But anyway, there was a statue of Beau Brummel outside our old office on Jermyn Street. So there you go. So there is a reminder at this point. On our last episode, we had a chap who has set the new bar for listener correspondence, who emailed in to offer a day's fishing on the test or a peg on the shoot day, on a shoot day of your choosing, but with some negotiation with us, I think, so we can look after his wallet. But he is asking for you to nominate your real true life shooting hero. Send them in to pod@gunsonpegs.com. Someone who goes above and beyond to share shooting with those who may not otherwise be involved. We're going to decide the winner. We're going to read a few of them out. And to win that fishing on the test or a peg on a shoot day. So it's an awesome prize. So send them in, pod@gunsonpegs.com. We're looking forward to seeing them.
And I think just like Gaspode, Brummel, and now Duncan, they will also get a pair of garters. The winning submissions. I heard on the last podcast. That's right, isn't it, Chris?
Absolutely, yeah. Inducted into the most noble order of the garters, which is this very exclusive, one of the most exclusive clubs in shooting. And you'll occasionally get someone crazy like us spot you on a shoot day going, I recognise those pink garters. So yes, you will shortly be in receipt of the much coveted Guns on Pegs podcast shooting sock garters. So if you too have a shooting quandary, query or dilemma that you'd like us to help with, or an unpopular opinion, of course, or a forgotten drive, which sometimes we get, they're really lovely, send them in to pod@gunsonpegs.com. Good. So Duncan, back to you and back to that chat about Braxted. You talked about the estate, the wall. Tell us about the shoot.
My grandfather bought the place in 1946, and he was an amazing shot. He shot in the Berlin Olympics in 1936.
What would that have been? Live pigeon or something?
No, clays. They were trying it out. It was a world championship held at the same time in order to test it out as an Olympic sport, as I understand it.
Okay.
So he didn't get an Olympic medal, but he got a silver medal for the England team. And he shot for England from 1936 to 1949 without interruption except for the war, where he was running the Plessy Company in the central line between Gants Hill and Newbury Park, making components for the Merlin engine and radio and radar to escape the bombs. He was an amazing man. He learnt to shoot in Cambrai, having run away from Felsted, age 17, joined the London Scottish as a private, and was a sniper. And it turned out I discovered at a GWCT ball that we had here by a guy who actually sold his very considerable collection of Holland and Over Under Royals, that not only, and I never knew this until this guy told me, was did he shoot skeet for his country, but he also shot rifle for his country, which is a unique combination of skills.
Yeah.
And I think probably one of the only people to have done so. So he was Sir Alan Clark, an amazing shot. And he, when he bought Braxted, looked at the game books and said, right, we're going to start this off again, and did a lot of planting. And the Plessy Company, which he regarded as his own personal company, even though we didn't own any shares anymore, having built it from scratch, sort of ran it as a corporate entertainment. I mean, a really early version thereof in 1946. And we've been shooting ever since as a family. And I took it over in earnest in about the mid-90s with my father, and we hired this incredible keeper called David Dronfield from Derbyshire. He came up from Kent, but he was originally from Derbyshire. And he and I have had the most fantastic time with the shoot. He introduced me to the Kansas Thunder. So we were partridges, but now we're partridges and pheasants. And the Kansas Thunder he discovered on a road trip to America, which he asked me to send him on, which he went on with his 18-year-old son. And he came back saying, we've got to have these little things. They are unbelievable little rockets. And they do what they see on the tin. They're designed in Kansas, which is obviously as flat as a billiard table, to go up and up and up and up, which they do. And so for Essex, although we have some undulation, we have some spectacular pheasant partridge drives. And often the pheasants are really awe-inspiring, which for East Anglia is a great pleasure. A lot of people say there's no point going all the way to the West Country when 30 minutes away they do this extraordinary shooting. And so it goes on, and we do about 40 to 50 days. We're very much the low end of that this last couple of years. That it's becoming a struggle selling shooting, as you know.
Well, I was going to ask Duncan, have things changed over the last few years? And
no, without question, I've lost a lot of old teams, a lot of younger teams giving it up. There was the whole lead issue that seemed to knock another few teams on the head. So it's pretty tough now, and I suspect it's not going to stop. Now, when you look at my grandfather's game books in 1946, he would shoot 50 wild birds with 6 guns, 3 members of the family, 3 tenant farmers, and be happy as a clam. And I've David Dronfield's son, David Dronfield Jr., has now taken over. And I've told him that I predict that his job in 10 years' time will be producing 5 to 6 wild family days and protecting me from incursions on the estate by various unfriendly groups, particularly those who want to dismantle and sell my wall. And his job will be sort of security officer and vermin controller. And I that's where I see it going, to be honest.
But you will still be shooting and enjoying it, I assume.
Yeah, I jolly well hope so. I mean, the day that someone says I cannot do what I want on my own land from that standpoint will be a very dire and dark day for me. And, it will all be wild. It'll all be down to our skill in terms of getting a harvestable excess or surplus. But if they say you can't kill any vermin, then we've got problems. God forbid.
What makes you think it will get to that point? What are the things that you think are going to cause it to get to that?
Politics. I think it'll be political.
And you feel that therefore they'll sort of ban releasing of game, basically?
Or licensing it out of existence. They'll do it slowly. That's the worst case. You never know. They might leave us alone. But frankly, when I hear some of the stuff on the media, I think it's a very populist move, and we know what the government's colour is becoming. And I can only see, 10 years of that is going to get progressively harder. I think price per bird will go out of the window. It'll be price per experience. Luckily, we've got a wonderful house and we can put up people as my guests here and give them an extraordinary sort of stay, 2 lovely dinners and a day out, and you get what you get. We'll try our hardest and you get what you get, and that there'll be a price. And that price hopefully will pay for the keeper and his team.
I've thought about this a lot, obviously, doing what we do. And that experience of coming to stay in the house, going out on the estate, having some shooting, maybe staying 2 nights, just really getting away from it all, which is what shooting's all about in the first place. As much as that would be horrendous in terms of the change for all sorts of other reasons, jobs and economic and huge amount of environmental benefit, part of me kind of feels like, well, it's not that. Hope wouldn't quite be the end of the world. It would be close to it, but it wouldn't be the end of the world at all. And we'd still actually have quite a lot of fun. I mean, I don't want to be, I'm certainly not giving in when I'm talking like this. I'm just trying to imagine, let's say that we've tried our hardest and all that's happened. I kind of feel like you still can have that experience and you can have all the fun that you have in the house and all that sort of stuff that you've got on your estate.
Yeah, the devastation is relative. For a lowland partridge pheasant shoot, and they're still coming to the house, it's limited. And as I was saying, we're going back to 1946, my grandfather's day. Where the devastation is in those Yorkshire grouse villages, where it's just a total wipeout. All the jobs go, and as does the curlew and the lapwing and all of that. So that's what we've got to thank the GWCT for and support them, and that segs actually nicely into any reason that we can come up with to support what we're doing, in terms of feeding, using the food, and
well, indeed, and we must come on to the Country Food Trust just on that previous point, because I don't want you get very differing opinions on this. I personally am not quite where you're at on that. I'd definitely be a bit more positive. I absolutely understand why you feel that way and the concern over the sort of political nature of it. But I think there will definitely be changes. We have to do our own changes, quite significantly, actually. But I don't think it will quite go that far for so many other reasons.
Well, I hope you're right. I'm just managing my expectations so that it doesn't break my heart, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, for self-preservation.
It's interesting, Duncan, you brought up the village or the grouse village, because I think we spend a lot of time on this podcast and elsewhere talking about the 2 of the 3 stools of the 3-legged stool that often gets discussed, the conservation side of things, the economic side of things. But we don't spend a lot of time talking about the social impact of game shooting. As you were mentioning, the tractor driver side of things, and all your work in the Country Food Trust, which I know we're really keen to hear about, particularly the social impact that Braxted Park have had on your local area.
To my mind, the Country Food Trust, along with the GWCT, really, really important reasons for leaving shooting alone. But as the bags diminish in size, I think it's really important that they pivot to venison, which is a serious problem. And again, there's no doubt a large body of people that think that shooting deer is cruel, and yet the national herd is as big as it's been since 1066. For every tree that the government plants for net zero, the deer eat it. It's got to be dealt with. And it's a no-brainer for me that the Country Food Trust, Fair Share, people like that team up, and we whether it's pheasant, partridge, or venison, this wonderful, wonderful meat gets recycled domestically to people who need it. And that's why I love the Country Food Trust. It was such a great thing to be able to say, these pouches that we deliver to food banks in Essex are paid for by the people who shoot.
Yeah.
End of. And I put a quid a bird on my invoices, and it was like a little tax, I guess. And I say, if you shoot here, you contribute.
Did you notice any impact locally on how people viewed the shoot because of all that work you were doing?
Oh, gosh, yes. I remember addressing a group in July, one terribly hot July, an annual general meeting of about 6 or 7 food banks. These people are not natural shoot supporters. And they all came up to me afterwards saying, this is fantastic. Thank you so much. And actually, I do come from a farming background and I get it. But equally, there were lots of urban dwelling ladies who were just saying, I had no idea. And it's fantastic because they don't have the money to buy the protein which the homeless need. And this was being given free, masses of carbohydrate, masses of potato pasta, but no meat. They couldn't afford it. And there it was coming in from the Country Food Trust for free, paid for by the people who shot. And it's a wonderful bridge between the country and the town. Not to say there aren't the food banks needed in the country. There are. But it's a particularly good bridge, I always think. And the more that we could bridge the gap between those of us that live in the country and those of us who live in town, the better. And it was a great bridge. That's what motivated me. I'm sure you too, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was during the time that we've been serving as trustees, I think we reached 3 million meals from virtually none. And it was just so rewarding to be involved in that sort of huge growth. And you're absolutely right about venison. It's the next big opportunity. It's the number of deer are really only going one way. And as you say, the mad justification I saw in both manifestos talking about planting trees again the other day, and the number of saplings that get absolutely hoovered up. That's following significant expense to plant them by deer that we then can't do anything about. And I was in a debate with someone about the reintroduction of wolves and lynx in Scotland, and they were saying this is absolutely needed. This is the right thing to do. And I was sort of saying, I can't believe that you think that's the way to keep the deer population under control when we can easily, if we need a bit more incentivization because we're not getting the numbers to where we need them to. But if with a little bit more incentivization through some sort of a little bit more government support, with the Country Food Trust, deer numbers could come under serious control and funnel all that rich protein or lean protein into the food chain through to people in need. And I just cannot understand why you'd want a wolf or a lynx to go and eat that deer when someone else who's going hungry could be eating it. I just don't get it. Yeah. And so, I really hope that sort of continues to progress in the right way because and the same with pheasant and partridge, although it's less of an issue now. We don't have the surplus. Well, I say this slightly nervously because when lead goes in Europe, which it will go before it does in the UK legally, we will have to suddenly find a home for all of the game in the UK, and currently 80% of our shot game goes into Europe. So suddenly I think we might be back on the pheasant and partridge trail around the UK, but we'll see. But either way, it's been fantastic progress.
Yeah.
So coming back to just the shoot on the estate, and I think drifting off it, you've mentioned a few times getting out and about. you've obviously been there and done that quite a lot. So what I want to know, and I think there's a few people listening to this, when you're hosting and you're at home and team of guns turns up, what does good look like to you? And I'm thinking here, get guests, but also paying guns on the day. As this sort of shoot owner and host, what does that gun who you think, God, they're absolutely the type of gun I want to come back? What is it that you think that sort of stands them out?
An appreciation of what's gone into it. That's number one. You can always tell when someone really appreciates how much effort goes in. They make an effort to go and talk to the keeper, the picker-uppers, the beaters, who respond in kind. They love it when people notice how much work goes in. Smile on the face. Obviously, someone who knows what they're doing, and someone who just, is having a great time, which is what we're all about. So it's really, that's it. A deep and profound appreciation of the day out and all the effort, which we're already, it never stops. My guys are out there all hours today, feeding the partridges and pheasants, hatching them, incubating them, hatching them, rearing them, releasing them, feeding them, dogging them in, and then the day itself. And all the amazing help he gets from a lot of the beating team, constructing the sheds, repairing all the release pens, etc., etc. So you can tell it a mile away when someone is genuine. And it's a huge contrast that someone just turns up, shoots some birds, sleeves his gun, and then goes off to take a phone call. That's the opposite of what I want on this shoot.
And do you find certain types of teams are more appreciative than others, or is there any pattern there? Or do you think?
Yeah, there would be. The overshot back in the day, the overshot hedge fund manager who does it and doesn't really give a damn. Versus a wandering syndicate of East Anglian farmers. That is chalk and cheese.
It's fascinating because it's such a simple answer to what is quite a tricky question in a way.
Well, I interpreted your question, Chris, as how do you get invited back? So I don't know if
that is the other way of interpreting it. Exactly that, because those are the people that will stick out in Duncan's mind there with the answer, right?
Yeah.
Well, one of my most wonderful memories is having a very, very experienced shot from Yorkshire come down, and he was lucky enough to be at number 3 stand in New Plant, our best wood. And he came up to me and he said, I shot every pheasant and missed every partridge in that ride. It was where the partridges and the pheasants come over a high oak ride. And he, of course, was miles in front of the partridge because he doesn't realize they're going slower. And he missed every one. And then he grabbed me and said, "Isn't this fun?" And I thought, there's a man who just loves the whole thing.
Isn't that nice? I mean, just someone who genuinely loves it. I've shot with a few people who genuinely love it as hosts, and it makes a huge difference.
Yeah,
absolutely. Right, Duncan, we must begin to wrap up. And I think you know what's coming, but we're on to our segment, Desert Island Shooting. Chris, you normally introduce this one, but it's my turn this time. The extinction level event asteroid hits tomorrow, Duncan. Your affairs are in order. Your wall is built, loved ones and enemies reconciled, dogs fed, and tomatoes watered. Your last day begins how?
Basically, I miss this shoot up in Inverness called Glentromie. Lana Berwick, my cousins used to own it. It got bought by the Scandinavian gentleman who owns most of Scotland. And I could walk you, even though I know they wouldn't have been kept for years and years. I would be able to walk you to every single line of butts. And in my perfect world, I am in a time machine, and I go back there, and the tick have gone, and and we're back there as we were in the late 60s. And these were without question, the most exciting grouse known to man. Little black things in the cairngorms. Not big bags, but my goodness, every single one a screamer. And we used to do 5 days on the trot, 5 different beats.
Wow!
Never covering the same ground.
Goodness me!
And that's where I'd go. That's where I'd go, assuming that you've given me a time machine.
Yeah, no ticks. I like that.
And no ticks. And I would have my. We used to go up when it was diminishing. There were only 2 beats left. I used to take up 15 mates, and we'd share 9 butts between 15 of us, double butting. And God, we had fun, and laughed and ate and drank, and it was so beautiful. And that's where I'd go.
That's amazing. So you've brought back about 20 forgotten drives that no longer exist, and you've exterminated ticks for your desert island shooting. That's impressive. I like it. Well, look, Duncan, a really lovely way to finish it. I can't believe that you've actually done it. That feels like one of those desert island shootings that someone just made up, but this is actually something that used to happen, which is crazy.
Yeah. And so, you said you gave me helicopters and
the time machine
and money, but I'm asking for a time machine.
Yeah, perfect. Well, that's absolutely doable. So, brilliant. Well, look, thank you, Duncan, very much for joining us, and lovely to hear about it all.
Well, thank you, and I really enjoyed it, chaps. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Duncan, so much.
Okay.
So all that remains for me to say is a final reminder that you can get your hands on a pair of the exclusive Guns on Pegs shooting sock garters by sending us your shooting dilemmas for us to resolve, or by sending us your unpopular opinions, or sharing your forgotten drives. Just send us an email to pod@gunsonpegs.com, and if we read it out in the next episode, we'll send you some garters. George and Chris will be back in a couple of weeks. Until then, thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.
Wow.